Hello, hello. Happy Black History Month and welcome to HCA Presents, the festival circuit. I am your host, KB, and this is our final Sundance 2022 review show. So we are going to be chatting about a lot of films, the overall experience. We're going to talk awards. It's going to be a great and entertaining show. But first, let me introduce my guests and co-hosts. I am going to start with Sharronda Williams of Pay Your Weight. Sharronda and I collaborate on a lot of different projects, and she is one of my favorite YouTubers and critics and reviewers. So welcome, Sharronda. Hey,
Okay,
Sharronda.
what are your favorite? I feel so blessed.
Yes. So
Thanks
good to
for
see
having
you.
me.
Thank you so much for joining. You know what? I'm going to give you center stage. I want you to tell the people what you do, where you are, where they can find you. Just give us all the tea.
I mean, what don't I do, you guys? But my name is Sharronda Williams, and I run a YouTube channel and website by the name of Pay Your Weight, where I share reviews on TV shows and movies, and I also do interviews with celebrity talent for those same movies and TV shows. And I just try to make it every day without cheating on my diet. I'm on a diet right now, so just pray for me real quick. But outside of that, I review movies and TV shows, and I also try to stick to my diet at the same time.
Okay, well, what a task. I wish you well on this diet.
Thank you.
But before we dive into that, we have one more guest. This is Anthony. Honestly, we just met. I'm super excited. Another fellow HCA critic and member who is doing his thing. So welcome, Anthony.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Excited to be here.
Anthony, thank you so much for joining. It's so wonderful to meet. I'm going to put this in quotes in real life because I mean, like, we're still over
Yes.
StreamYard.
We'll get there one day.
I know, right? Okay, but we're going to exit and let you have the stage. Tell everyone what you're up to, what you're working on, and where they can find you on social.
Well, as she said, I'm Anthony Digioia. I run a YouTube channel and website called Silver Screen Analysis, where I cover all kinds of new movies and cover film festivals. Mostly on my YouTube channel, I dive into a bunch of 80s and 90s movies, just those nostalgic favorites growing up. I like to do that kind of stuff. And if you knew what I ate today, I would not be on a diet, although I probably should be.
Now, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Listen, I want everyone to live their truth. I want everyone to enjoy whatever foods they're enjoying. I mean, listen, if I told y'all what I had today, crab nachos, it is not diet friendly, but it is delicious. So, I mean, listen, let everyone live your truth.
If you need something in 5 minutes, you got to do what you got to do.
Exactly. All right, y'all. So let's dive into Sundance. This one was a whirlwind. I saw somebody said they saw 70 films. I was like, now wait a minute. How? Where did the time go? I did not see quite that many, but I want to know, and I will just, start with you, Anthony. This is actually your very first Sundance. So how was your experience overall? What were some highlights for you? And, I normally ask in person or virtual, but since your first and only experience is virtual, I kind of assumed you want in person next time.
Yeah, I definitely want to be able to go to Utah, but Sundance was a blast. So many different films. It was just fun to watch. I got 22 movies in and 2 docs. Most of those were actually pretty entertaining. Some of those were actually some great movies. So it was just a good time. I watched so many movies in such a short amount of time. I think I was going to sleep at night and having these dreams of like 5 and 6 movies mashed up. And I wish I could have wrote that stuff down because it would probably make a good movie in itself. But it was a blast. I can't wait to do it again next year.
Oh man. So tell me what your favorite thing about the festival is. Not your favorite film, but just kind of overall, with this being a virtual experience, kind of what was the most rewarding part where you were like, oh, yes. And do you think that they should keep a virtual component moving forward in some capacity?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you're going to want to do in-person stuff, but I think how smooth and seamless the virtual process went. There was no buffering times. It was just really cool to be able to go on and see all these different movies. The layout was really good to be able to see the synopsises and who was starring in there and stuff like that. And you click your movies, you get your schedule, and it just felt cool. It's like you're picking all these movies. You're like, look at me, I ironed out my schedule. And you're watching this stuff. You go instantly over to Twitter to post your reactions, and then you see what other people are saying about it. And it's just, you're kind of swept up in that for a few days. And it's kind of cool to just, forget about everything else.
Yep, totally. All right, Sharronda, you and I have been in person at the festival a couple of times. You're an OG. How was your overall kind of festival experience this year? What were some things that you liked, maybe that you didn't like? Let us know.
I mean, as someone who gets sick every year going to Sundance before we, knew what Miss Rona was doing, it was great not to be sick this year. And it was nice to just be able to watch movies, from the comfort of your own home, being able to add more movies into that rotation just because you don't have to hop from theater to theater. But I had a good time watching everything. I mean, I wish I could have did more docs because I really, really love watching docs. It's probably my favorite part of any festival, especially with Sundance. But yeah, I had a really good time being able to just chat with people still to see like what movies should I add, and especially when the awards came out, it was nice to actually get some recommendations for some things that I might not have seen.
Yeah. So, guys, I'm going to be transparent. I completely dropped the ball on docs this year. And it wasn't my intention, but like mid festival, I had like some personal issues that popped up. And so I didn't get to see the docs as I'd hoped for. So, publicists, if you're watching this, just know I'm going to reach out directly to get these doc links. So, thank you in advance. But yeah, so I dropped the ball on docs, but I actually had a great festival experience. Sundance, I say this often, I'm just going to slightly tweak it. It's one of my top it's one of my top film festivals of every single year. And I just think that like the energy in person is really, really unmatched. I always say, Sundance is a place where dreams can come true if you're in this business and in this industry. And you meet a lot of people who work in the film business, not just directors and actors and writers, but, people in film acquisition, talent managers. I mean, there's just so many dynamic people that you meet, and you can really get a full sense of the process of, how to create a film and get it to distribution. So this is also one of my favorite festivals, mostly because there's so many films that haven't been picked up yet. And so they're looking for distribution. So it's nice to kind of get kind of that first sneak peek, so to speak, of all the films. So this year was great. I mean, I saw a lot of things that I liked. A few things that were not for me that I did not. But overall, I had a good experience. But I will say, man, last year I feel so spoiled because what Sharronda actually texted me last year and told me to watch Coda. It was not on my list before then. And Coda ended up being my favorite film of the year, period. It didn't matter what film I saw, that feeling that Coda gave me. So I was looking for, like Coda 2.0 this year. And I can't necessarily say that I found it from like the feeling perspective, but I did see some really, really dope and dynamic films, and a lot of films that kind of made you wonder, a lot of introspective films, a lot of things that are questioning kind of the state that we're in now. It was a good festival. But yeah, I think we should always have a virtual ink component in some capacity just for accessibility reasons. But I do miss in person. I won't even lie. I love being there in person. And unlike Sharronda, I don't get sick at the festival. So I'm like, take me back. Like, let me be free. So, okay, before we dive into, our deep reviews of Emily, the Criminal, and Emergency, I want to talk about awards. So, the first awards film that I really want to talk about is After Yang, which won the Alfred P. Sloan Feature Film Prize for an outstanding feature about science and technology. So, I will start with you, Anthony. How did you like After Yang? Was it the obviously it won the award for, you know, sci-fi and tech, but was it the tech that drew you in or the humanity of the feature instead?
After Yang is, I would say, a mixed bag for me. I loved the opening title sequence. That dance number was just kind of out of nowhere. So I was expecting this movie to kind of keep on that same path, but it didn't really feel like that. It explores this family that has this techno sapien that's like an AI brother to the daughter in the family, and I liked the elements of how basically they're, so basically the AI kind of crashes down and it can't be rebooted. So they find that there's all these memories that are stored in there that the AI techno sapien Yang's been storing in there. So it kind of explores like what it's like for artificial intelligence to maybe feel like human emotions. And it also kind of, as Colin Farrell goes back and he pulls these memories out to see what was in there, it kind of gives him a different perspective, like a third person viewing of his interactions with his family. But then the family chemistry wasn't really there. The minimalist approach to the performances didn't really work for me because it's kind of an emotional story in subject matter, but the way it was told kind of lacked a lot of emotion. I think a lot of the emotion you kind of just had to either feel for yourself, or I don't know. It didn't really work for me. I wouldn't say I disliked it, but I don't think it would be one that I would ever really watch again to see if there was more that I could pick up on, because a lot of the science fiction was just kind of there, but not really structured or foundationed out to kind of give it a lot of meaning to what all of it was. It was, you kind of had to take everything at face value. The progression was very slow. So if it's not one that's going to pull you in, I kept wanting to get into this movie and it just failed to kind of get me there.
Yeah. So I feel like this story is supposed to explore also, in addition to everything that you said in terms of the AI exploring kind of more meaningful human connections and love, it's also supposed to explore grief. And I kind of felt like we didn't necessarily need the technology aspects in order to explore grief. Like, I
Hmm.
understand that's the underlying point of the film, but in a lot of ways, I felt like we didn't need the tech. Like it could have been
Yeah.
one or the other. So this is actually a film I wanted to watch again, and I still actually want to watch again so I can see if there is something that I can pick up on that I missed before. Because I agree with you. Like for me, the chemistry really wasn't there with the family. And I started to ask myself, because that opening sequence is so incredible, but you can tell that the families are kind of put together, but it wasn't inherently clear if Jake and Kyra were put together or if the two of them chose each other and then they chose Mika as their daughter. You know, like I still wasn't entirely sure about that while I was watching.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
i I was like, okay. And here's the thing, I adore Jodie Turner Smith, so I was super excited about this. I actually adore Colin Farrell as well, and I think that, you know, he's going to have some really interesting films out this year. Can't wait for the Batman and that transformation, like truly, because he transforms in ways that
Hmm.
I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
But this, for me, I was just kind of like, wow, it's really just a lot of Colin Farrell um searching for like ways to get Yang's memories, while Kyra, Jodie Turner Smith as Kyra, is mostly at work. Like I was like,
Yeah.
she mostly spends all of her time at work in this film. So I'm a little like, okay. And
Yeah.
Mika is just kind of somewhere in the middle where like she wants to spend more time with her mom because she was like, well, dad is kind of boring. I mean, for a lack of a better phrase. And she was like, so, and her mom is like, well, you know, I got to go to work. And then Yang, of course, we know what happens to Yang on this journey. So she like misses her bestie brother. And I'm just like, okay. So it felt very fragmented in a lot of ways. But I will say, you know, Malia as Mika is amazing. Justin as Yang is really good as the AI. And I actually adored their chemistry, the relationship between them as siblings, the most.
Yeah. It was a film that was like cool to look at in places because some of the, there's like an herb garden behind the back seats in the car or something, stuff like that. That's just really cool. The cinematography was cool, but it just was a film that posed more questions. It was more like it posed more questions than it did provoke thought for me.
Yeah, like it is beautiful though. I mean,
Yeah.
I will say that 100%. I think it is stunning. It's beautiful. It's just gorgeous to look at. But for me, I think the storyline is so fragmented and it never really actually came together for me. But
Yeah.
I will kind of reserve, additional comments for my second viewing because I definitely do feel like I want to view it a second time just to see, just to see. And if at that second time it doesn't hit for me, well, then I know the truth of it all. So, there we are. All right. Well, I know Sharronda wasn't able to see After Yang, but I know she saw 892. So we are going to get into this because 892 won the jury prize for Best Ensemble. And 892 is the final feature film performance of the late, great Michael K. Williams. So for me, I'll just say, Michael K. Williams is always exceptional. He was a rare talent, incredible talent. But for me, this film is really made by John Boyega and Nicole Beharie. Like, I just think they elevated this to the 37th degree. And shout out to Nicole Beharie because she kills at Sundance like year after year after year. I'm like, girl is coming to Sundance to take it all, to win it all. So, Sharronda, we'll start with you. How did you feel about 892 overall as a film? And then in terms of this award, like, do you really feel like this was the best ensemble that you saw in a feature film at Sundance this year, or were there any other features that you thought had kind of an exceptional cast?
I think as far as like for performances, because I mean, if you really like take a deep dive into 892, you really are only in one main setting for the entire film. So it truly falls on the performances for the actors to keep you engaged. And also too, for a story like this where a character, with John Boyega's character would immediately come off not likable because you don't know why they're doing what they're doing, but for as you see like kind of these mannerisms, this politeness that his character has, it's the little things that he does to make you want to learn more about how this person could do something like that. And it really as like it's almost like a mystery because you're trying to figure out like, so what happened to where we found ourselves at the beginning of the movie. And it's just moving. And I think that really has to do with the performances from John Boyega, Nicole Beharie, and what many people would call a very small role of just playing one of these people who, unfortunately, I don't want to spoil it for anyone who doesn't know what the movie is about, but she takes a small role like she does in so many films, even though I want her to have more leading role films, but she's able to make a part her own. That this side character, you feel like they're just as important as the main person that the movie is focusing on. And then with Michael K. Williams, playing a part that kind of goes a different direction on what I thought his character would be doing. But it almost, I felt a peace and calmness while watching him on screen. And I do believe they should have won the ensemble award because I don't really know if there was a film that I watched where I was just like, wow, like I cannot see anyone else in these roles. And if they were not in this movie, I would not have enjoyed the movie as much. And so I think that's really kudos to the cast and the performances on top of this like gut wrenching story, this true story that really opens, your eyes to, what is happening with our veterans, these systems that are put in place for these people who go and give their lives to defend us, to defend their country, and how they're treated when they come back. It's just so many multiple layers to it, so many different feelings that you have. And it's a movie that honestly, after I watched it, I had to just take a moment, like an hour or two, to just decompress. I couldn't watch anything else because the story affected me so much. So I'm sorry for rambling, but it was one of my favorites.
No, not rambling. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention Selenis Leva, like her performance as well. I mean, it is a very concentrated area within the story. Like, you're only in this one place. But I will say I didn't know anything about this story because I had already actually moved away from Atlanta. But when I did a deep dive kind of into this story and what happened, I used to go to that Wells Fargo all the time. So I was really like, oh, I did not realize because it was by my house. So I was like, oh, I didn't realize this happened at the Wells Fargo that I used to visit frequently. And so I was just like, oh goodness. But you're right. I mean, it shines a brighter light on the fact that our veterans are not receiving the level of care that they should. And it was so heartbreaking in this film because he was something that I read about him as, like the human being in the story, the real life human being, excuse me, in the story was that's all they kept saying was, oh, he was so polite. That's really what everyone said the entire time. He was so polite. And we are almost like we knew that he wasn't there to hurt us. He just wanted his money. That's it. Like, that's all he wanted. He just wanted his money. He wasn't concerned about anything else. And it's just so unfortunate that it ended the way that it did because it didn't have to. So, Anthony, how did you feel about 892?
I loved it. I think would be my favorite movie of Sundance. I would completely agree with a lot of what you guys said, and to echo what Sharronda said, about just the tensity of the situation and just being locked into this single place for a bulk of the film. And it really just relies on all the performances. We've seen these movies before where you have some kind of hostage situation and these characters are usually just kind of cut and paste or plug and play cardboard characters. But Bahari and Leva both brought like human nuances and human emotions to their characters that really just made it that much more unnerving and tension filled because you really do care about them. Not that you don't in other movies, but there's just like a connection that you get with them. Like Bahari, just the way she tries to constantly control her emotions throughout everything that's going on. She has an understanding of the situation. So they're not just like screaming heads that are being held hostage. They're all in this situation together. And I think this is a movie to where I don't want people to like instantly wrap your head around the main character and like, I don't like what he was doing because he broke into a bank. I think it's really like he's kind of the pawn in this story. It's kind of like what you get when you have like a government implemented support system that's failed and you collide that with like human emotion and desperation. It just, Boyega's character could have been anybody. The bank could have been any bank. And really it's the situation that this story follows. And like Michael K. Williams just perfectly is able to come, like you said, just be that calm in this tension-filled story. It's like anytime you need kind of like the situation gets so tense and so stressful inside the bank, let's step out to the parking lot. Michael Williams just comes in. He's smooth. He's controlling. He's just got a rapport with Boyega's character, and it's just so engaging and thought-provoking and emotionally gripping. And like you said, it's like after it was over, I had to just shut everything off, go outside for a walk, get some fresh air, and kind of decompress after everything because you're like in that situation with those characters. And that's why I agree with this award. I think they easily had the best ensemble.
Yeah, and it's one of those rare films, to be honest, where the only person you walk away blaming is the government. Yes. Like truly, because I mean, all three of them are kind of inside this bank. And once you truly understand the story, I think that's a part of the film that I loved the most was the montages of him and his daughter, like just kind of sporadically pushed through and the importance of showing that, he was someone who was, struggling with mental health issues, but he also was a family man and he also was loving and he also was a great dad and he also was trying to figure it out. And he also was a hard worker, like they showed kind of all of the layers of him. But I think too, at the end, the thing that struck me the most is that still, after all of these years, they still don't have the money. And so that is like the entire point, and we still get here. And I'm like, still, and it's 2022.
I think even one of the most gut-wrenching moments in the movie, once you realize what the title means.
100%.
That moment when you realize, what the title is, and your jaw just hits the floor because you're just like, what is happening? And I think those are the movies that I want to watch. I want to watch movies that, it's always nice to, escape and kind of pour yourself into another story, especially when it's a true story. I think that just makes movies even more engaging when you know that this is based on something that happened. But I like movies that have a call of action, movies that stay with you after you watch it to make you think, to make you really question, your role in this world, question how you interact with people, or not knowing what people are actually going through. And I think that's what I enjoyed the most, is that this movie really made me think. This movie made me go do research afterwards. And I think that's why we go to the movies, to be inspired, to like just gain more knowledge about something. I wanted to give them kudos for that too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. So I agree with both of you 100%. This ensemble award was more than, I mean, it. No one else, nothing else I saw. You guys are right. Nothing else I saw really compares in terms of ensemble performances, for sure. So let's talk about the final award I want to chat about. Is Nanny. And shout out to Nanny, because today it was announced that they've been officially picked up by Monkey Paw Productions and Universal. So
Nice.
it will be in theaters. So congrats to the team and the creatives and the creatives and cast of Nanny. Shout out to them for that today.
You know, it took
But
way too long for that to happen.
it did. It did. It took longer. I mean, because the festival is over, and normally dynamic films like this get picked up during the festival. However, I'm really glad that it got picked up by Monkey Paw, me personally, because I just think that it's gonna go well for them come, widespread distribution. But Nanny won the jury prize for Best Dramatic Film. So, Sharronda, how did you feel about Nanny? Because for me, it is a wild roller coaster. I don't really do horror that much. So for y'all watching, I'm truly not really a horror fan. But this one I knew I had to see, because it just has so many different layers, and there are a lot of different horrors, I will say, that come to the surface and rise to the surface in a film like this. Plus, Ana Diop, shout out to Houston. So I had to watch my girl. So, I was like, oh yeah, absolutely. Let's get into it. So how did you feel about Nanny overall, Sharronda?
Nanny was actually another movie during the festival where I had to go look things up afterwards. And especially like it deals so much within, African culture, and just learning more about, what does water mean to you? When you have these feelings, like kind of like almost like a premonition that, something has happened, or just really about a mother's connection to her child, and what that looks like in two very contrasting examples that we see in the movie. I mean, there's so much that you can talk about with this movie that it delves into, from the horror, really the psychological horror that is happening throughout the course of the film. I mean, honestly, when you started, I didn't know what I was getting myself into, but I definitely didn't think, I didn't think I signed up for this. So it's a movie that, it's intriguing. Keep showing your toes, because you don't really know. It plays with different genres at the same time, because you don't really know, like, am I watching a horror movie? Is this more of a psychological thriller? Like, what are we getting here? And so I like that they play with the different tones of the movie, the different genres within the movie, but also adding in some culture, spirituality on top of that. Is really, as you figure out what this real story is that is happening, it takes you on a crazy ride. So it was very interesting.
Yeah, I really, really like Nanny. I'm glad that I took the time to watch it, even though, horror's not generally my jam. But I will say this, the entire time I was watching, because Aisha is an immigrant and she is coming to America to build a better life. So she does what, a lot of people do when they're immigrants, and that is become an au pair or become a nanny. And so she is the nanny for, she is Senegalese, and she is the nanny for a Caucasian family. And honestly, the entire time I was watching, I was kind of like, is this Caucasian family going to murder her because this kid loves her so much? Like, I mean, truly, because the whole time, and the little girl that she's watching, her name is Rose. Rose the whole time was like, girl, I want to be with you. And I was just like, I don't know that your family members are going to be okay with this, because Rose was very firm. Rose was like, listen, this is my girl. I'll go wherever she goes. Like, I'm going to do whatever she wants me to do. Rose was truly like,
She
this
had the
is my
food.
girl.
I'm
Yes.
going
And Rose said, I'm sorry. what is this food that you're giving me? She said, this is not Senegalese food. I don't want this. Rose said, I'm transformed. So the whole time, I was like, oh, this little girl is all in. I don't know that her parents are going to like this. Maybe this is going to end in murder. But you're right, Sharronda, because I was so on my toes thinking about like the obvious things, like, oh, they're probably going to kill her. If you're not paying attention, you'll miss the subtleties of everything else happening. And something that I really, really liked is, when it comes to African spirituality, which we don't get to see oftentimes on screen, and if we do, it's often associated with negativity or evil or negative connotation. And I like that this was, showing it from a different perspective and truly what it is. It's just a connection, not only to your ancestors, but to the elements and to the connection to the world, particularly in this instance, water, and a connection to listening to your spirit. Like once you become a mother, kind of having that maternal instinct, not just for your own kid, but for other kids as well, like just having that mama bear instinct and whatever that looks like. So I liked the duality between mothers, literally in every single mother that we saw, because there are quite a few mothers in this film. While it centers, kind of Aisha as being one of the main mother that we see pitted against Amy, who is, the woman that she works for. There's still a whole host of other mothers in the film that kind of give their opinions on motherhood, that give their advice on leaning into spirituality, that talk specifically about Mami Wata, which is like a spiritual water entity and being. And so it was just really, really, really interesting. And, I actually also like that there's a little bit of romance in there. Like, give me a little something, give me a little romance, a little light, a little love in the midst of all of the chaos and, kind of the social undertones, the political undertones, the racial undertones. There were so many different undertones in this film, but I do like that they were able to put, a little bit of love and joy kind of even in the midst of this psychological torment that was happening. So I think it was a great dramatic film. Sharronda, do you think that it should have won for Best Dramatic Film, or do you felt like you saw a couple of other films that would have been mighty contenders in terms of that award?
Was 892 in that same category?
It should have been. I mean, from a dramatic standpoint.
I mean, I still would have won with 892. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it was in the same category, but if I'm,
I mean, it should have been in terms. It's also another feature drama. In my personal opinion, it should have been in that category.
Yeah,
but
I mean, my vote would have been 892. But I'm trying to think about other movies like dramatic performances that I've seen. I mean, even Master. The young woman in Master, she delivers a really great performance. I can't think off the top of my head. When you didn't see 20 plus films, they start.
It's hard. Yeah, it is.
Leaving to each other.
Now, Anthony, listen, I know you didn't see Nanny, but were there any other films, I guess, apart? Because you said 892 is your favorite film of the festival, but any other dramatic features that you saw that you feel like maybe could have, been in this category and been, given Nanny a run for its money?
I think Master had a shot. I liked that. I liked the layering of that. I'm just excited, like what you guys were talking about this movie, that we're starting to get. I'm so over like shallow horror movies and shallow thrillers. So getting stuff that actually makes you think and gets you kind of consumed into it really makes the frightening moments hit that much better. So I would say Master was in there, but I mean, I still would probably take 892. Yeah, right. That movie, I love that movie from start to finish. It gets going so quick and it doesn't let up until it's over. So.
Yeah, let me tell you how you are right. They at 892, as soon as it starts, you're like, oh, okay. Like it's really no slowing down for sure. All right, so we could talk about awards all day, but truly, let's just dive into these reviews and rate a couple of films. So I want to start with Emily the Criminal. Because it too is not what I was expecting. So Emily the Criminal follows a down on her luck and saddled with tons of debt woman named Emily, who then gets involved in a credit card scam that pulls her into the criminal underworld of Los Angeles and ultimately leads to deadly consequences. So, Anthony, kick us off. How did you feel about Emily the Criminal?
Emily the Criminal, I enjoyed it. Aubrey Plaza's performance, I really enjoyed that. I love Theo Rossi in this one as well. I liked this movie while I watched it and the ride that it took me on, but surprisingly, it wasn't one that stuck with me much longer after watching it. It's kind of weird. Maybe it's because I felt like the tone of this story was off. Maybe the message it wanted to tell was a little bit one thing once and then it kind of shifted into something else. I'm not really sure it was clear on what it wanted from this character. And that might have been why I wasn't fully engaged in this movie, but I mean, I did enjoy it.
Sharronda, how did you feel about Emily the Criminal?
Let me tell y'all something. And somebody who has been having to pay back these student loans, I felt this movie in my spirit. I felt it in my spirit, y'all. Maybe because it was, I mean, I just want to let the people know out there watching, I'm not a criminal, not doing anything illegal. But to have a movie that takes this, like, you know, you're thinking criminal, like, oh, it's going to be a heist. It's going to be like some type of heist that is happening. But then to have it come back to what everyone, like a huge topic, you know, even in politics today about the ever mounting student loan debt that is literally like stopping people from being able to live their lives. And when you really put it into context, to if there's nothing else that you can have to do, because I mean, I've been unemployed where the student loan companies, they don't care. They're still asking for your money. They don't care about what your job status is. And it's just interesting because it even addresses outside of student loans. It addresses, you know, America's relationship with work and how work should be free labor at times. Like you have to give free labor in order to be able to have the potential opportunity to make money. And so the fact that it touches on so many things, and this is honestly another movie where you take a character that honestly, they're a criminal. You're not supposed to like criminals. Like you're supposed to have no sympathy. But once you get to learn more about who Emily is, what Emily's circumstances are, why Emily is doing what she is doing, or even entertaining the thought of doing what she's doing, you start to like her character. You start to be like, okay, I know being a criminal is bad, but I'm not mad at you. I'm okay. If you make it through this, I'm rooting for you. Kick it back to the student loan company. So I think it's interesting how they take something, you hear criminals, so people think like, ooh, it's going to be like guns, shooting, it's going to be all these fun things happening. And then it's like, no, man, like I got student loans too. Like I empathize with Emily as well. I like movies that kind of trick you, you know, walking in thinking you're going to expect something else. And then you come out once again like, man, I wonder how many of my friends are criminals because they got student loan payments. You just think about these weird things. Maybe I was the only one who thought that at the end. But yeah, I really liked it. And Aubrey Plaza, what can't she do? My only issue with Emily the Criminal is I wanted more for Theo Rossi to do in the film because he's such a talented actor. And I just don't know if he gets enough films that really shows his range as an actor. And I just wish that we would have got to see a little bit more from him in that movie.
So I will say this, I don't necessarily agree that I wanted to see more of Theo Rossi's character only because this is Emily's story. I agree that he should definitely be in more films. He should lead more films. You know, he is a really great actor. But I think because this really centered Emily's journey, I didn't really need more of him. I will say, you know, Aubrey kills in this. I just think it's interesting because it offers up the question, just how far are you willing to go to live the life? And really, let's be clear, Aubrey, like Emily in this film was not trying to live a lavish life. She was just trying to survive. And I think that is what begs the question, you know? And so she's like, when she goes to that job interview and they're asking her question after question, you know, why do you have a criminal history? And, you know, she's like, because I was in a bad relationship. Okay. Then they're like, which is hindering her from getting a job. But what was she supposed to do? Not protect herself in this case, you know? So it's like, okay. And then, you know, they're like, well, why did you take time off? And she's like, I had a sick grandparent. So like I had to stop working and take care of my grandparent full time. It's just all of these real life, real world things. And you start to realize how capitalism just truly is not built for the working class at all. Like, because they don't care what happens in your life or what circumstances arise. Pay me this student loan money because we really truly don't care, that you are unemployed or that you can't get work. And so I thought it was an interesting dynamic, specifically between Emily and her friend from college. I thought that they had a really interesting dynamic because here are two people, her and Liz. They grew up together in New Jersey. They're both in LA now. They went to art school, went to college together. Liz has this kind of high powered career. And we know that Emily has all this student loan debt, but didn't even graduate. Like she had to take time off to care for her sick family member. And, Liz is trying to help her, but they really have two different world views and two different life experiences. And Liz truly can't really understand where Emily is coming from. Like it's oftentimes in their scenes together, I kind of find it where Liz is a little bit insensitive because it's like, girl, why would you send me on a job interview that doesn't pay? And I don't have like, what are we doing here? Why would you set that up? Especially, or you could have at least told her, like, don't set me up on an unpaid job interview and not tell me. You could have given her thrown her a bone and said, listen, it's unpaid, but this is what we can do, et cetera, et cetera. She didn't even do that. So I just thought, Emily was really down on her luck in almost every situation. Now I will say this, there were often times that I was like, now Emily girl, you're turning out to be a bad criminal. Like, and I guess it's the criminal learning curve. I don't know, but I'm not a criminal. But I truly was like, no, girl, we are making some terrible life choices right now, apart from being a criminal, because that's a sticky line. I really didn't think she was making a terrible life choice by trying to figure out how to make money to survive. But somewhere in there, when she was dropping the ball a couple times in the film, I was like, now, girl, now didn't the person that you're modeling your criminal activity after tell you not to do this and you just went and you did it? I was like, Emily, come on. So I thought it was a really good film, really intriguing. And shout out to Amanda, because Amanda actually told me to watch this film. Like she had recommended it in her Sundance Twitter feed. And I was like, well, let me check this out. And people kept talking about, this is the Emily I want to see. I was like, y'all gonna stop shading Emily in Paris, okay? Please stop shading Emily in Paris. Two Emilys can exist, and I like both of the Emilys. So yeah, I 100%. Yeah, I'm like, come on, guys, you're being messy. So I'm going to give you your last thoughts, Anthony, about Emily in The Criminal. See, now y'all got me talking about Emily in Paris. Lord, Emily, The Criminal. And then I want you to rate it, like out of 5 stars, tell us what we're working with.
It's definitely a solid film to watch. Aubrey Plaza really delivers a great performance, and she does have lots of layering to her character. I kind of liked the edginess to her character. Almost, it kind of feels like she just kind of says, like, I just really enjoy this. I like the rush of being the criminal, and I think that kind of messed up the story a little bit for me. I think she didn't really circle back to trying to better her life. I think she kind of maybe got a taste of that and maybe liked that. So the message felt a little bit off, but I still enjoyed it. I'd give it a solid 3 out of 5.
Okay, 3 out of 5. All right, Sharronda, you're up.
Look, any movie that is trying to show how student loans are ruining our lives, I'm always going to be here for it. But on top of that, it's a really cool story that, it kind of gives its audience something to intrigue you and keep you watching. But it has something a lot deeper than what you would have expected it to have. And so with the performances from Aubrey Plaza, and really some of the real world connections that even I was able to make, that really ties into what so many people are going through in the country right now. I really enjoyed it. It was a pleasant surprise, and I would definitely tell people to watch it. So my rating will be a 3 out of 5 as well.
All right. Well, listen, I enjoyed Emily the Criminal. I agree with Anthony in the sense that, yeah, you get to the end and maybe she doesn't change her life, but I'm okay with that because ultimately, I felt like Emily was trying to do the right thing for so many years and it wasn't working out. And you know what? Sometimes you have to take a different approach to life. And that's what Emily did. And she chose that different approach. And I hope it works out for her because ultimately she tried doing everything by the book and was even very hesitant about entering into this credit card scam, and then ultimately just kind of gave in. Like, life is still kicking me at every single turn, and the student loan company is still calling, so I'm going to have to do something, and rent is still due and bills are still due, and my job is cutting back on hours. I need a break. And so I feel like I understand why she kept going in the direction that she did. I think that there were some unfortunate circumstances that occurred, but I think she learned enough of those lessons that if she is going to make a living out of being a criminal for the rest of her life, then she will take those lessons and not make the same mistakes. So I agree with everyone here. My rating is definitely going to also be 3 out of 5 stars. I mean, to be honest, Aubrey, Theo, they make this film. Their chemistry in this film, was out of control. It was so good. The lessons, the balance, the friendship. It just was like, I felt like the two of them really made this film what it is. All right. So now that we are done, talking about the criminal's journey and how we agree or maybe don't agree, let's talk about Emergency. So, Emergency follows 3 college students who are ready for a night of legendary partying that end up having to weigh the pros and cons of calling the police when faced with an unexpected situation. So, Sharronda, I'm going to toss the ball to you. How did you feel overall about Emergency? Tell me how you felt about, the performances and the writing, because it is quite heavy of a subject matter, even though they do layer it with a bunch of comedic moments.
I just realized that there's a theme with the past 3 movies that we've been talking about. How you go into the movie thinking that it's one thing and it totally turns into something different. And that was definitely the case with Emergency. But I think for this movie, I think that this is actually a very smart and bold choice. Because you get so caught up on, you think that it's this like crazy night in college, what could go wrong? And you go on this crazy journey. But as you switch into the third act of the film, you realize like how having this crazy night in college, how that can have serious implications for you, especially if you are a person of color. If you're a young man of color, you can see how quickly that night of fun, that night of crazy could really change your life for the worse at the drop of a dime. And I think that they do such a good job of really balancing, there's these humorous things, there's these wise things that, and it's based on these 2 best friends in college, and you get to see really the difference of how you can be 2 Black men in America, but when you come from different walks of life, one who was sheltered from what the real world could be, and the other one who was fully immersed in that, you get to see the differences. You get to see how people are different even within the same culture, depending on how you're raised. And even as they have these interactions with these other students, even they begin to see like, wow, like this is like you could be in the same country and live 2 totally different experiences. And I think that's what the director does so well, of balancing that and really showing you like, yes, I'm having a good time, all this crazy stuff happening. And then you realize like in reality, this could lead to some really bad consequences. And so I think that they do a really great job of, I guess first, they really are tricking the audience into thinking they're going into this college comedy story, but then you're getting a real life lesson at the end of the movie. And so this was a shocker for me because I honestly didn't think I was going to enjoy it when I started watching it. And then as we got into the third act, I was like, wow, I did not see that coming. And I was pleasantly surprised by it.
I have a question for you, but first I want to know your thoughts, Anthony, just in terms of the film overall, how you felt about it.
Absolutely loved the movie. It like caught me off guard. Like she said, it's almost like a blend of Harold and Kumar with Higher Learning. But as odd as that sounds, is as perfect as the elements are together, because it could have easily been such a heavy-handed movie, just diving into tons of just emotionally intense issues. But it just cuts it with the levity and the charisma and the charm of the main characters, and it weaves those undercurrents of just all the substance of the story. Really just helps proceed through the friendship of these two guys. It really tests their friendship. It makes their friendship just go through lots of ebbs and flows throughout this crazy night, and it'll have you just like really intense and really emotional one minute, and the next minute you're kind of laughing but still feeling the emotions from the scene before. And it's kind of like one that could catch you off guard, because both of these guys, when this film starts, they kind of are like a couple of college kids, but by the time the third and fourth act or the end of the film comes around, they really pour on these emotional layers that really come out of nowhere, and they both come on very sincere, and it's just a very authentic movie with human emotions, and just growing up and dealing with, like you said, just different walks of life, and even if you're in the same race.
Yeah, so I'll say this: RJ Kyler uh, is stellar. I mean, like truly. And he gave one of my favorite performances in The Harder They Fall. He was actually probably my favorite character in The Harder They Fall, because he was just so lovable in my personal opinion. But in this film, the dynamic between Sean and Kunle is just, it's hard, right? Because they are so very different, from two very different walks of life. And they have had two very different experiences moving through this country as Black men. But what occurs that night is that Kunle gets a rude awakening to an experience that Sean has had far too many times, like far too many times, him and his family. And so I want to know, because this dichotomy between the two of them is really kind of the heart of the film, right? Like, you see that their friendship has some cracks in it, in the sense that you don't know that they can truly feel like they can fully be themselves with each other at certain points in the film. And it's not until this traumatic experience, I feel like, that Kunle and Sean are actually able to drop some of these kind of masks that they've been wearing, even with each other, even as close as they are, and finally kind of build the friendship and the brotherhood that they've always wanted to, but were very unsure how the other would be receptive to. Like, there are just a lot of layers that are broken down after this traumatic night. So I want to know, because I think this is a huge point of contention in the film. You know, do either of you blame Sean for choosing himself and his personal safety in this film? Because I think that really at the core, that's the core of the film. Like, they're on the edge, but we all know too often what it's like to be Black in America, and it's not always good, particularly when it comes to police interaction. And so, you know, can we really blame Sean for choosing himself and choosing his personal safety, especially with the way that he grew up?
No, I mean, it's like the difference when you say like book smart versus street smart. And Kunle just hasn't lived that life. And so, I mean, I think Sean does a really great job of really sticking with him for most of the movie, trying to convince him that like all these things aren't right. But at a certain point in time, you just got to give up. I feel like he gave everything that he needed to give. And I was totally like, when he was like, I'm out, and I was like, finally, thank you, because your friend's not getting it, so he's gonna have to learn the hard way. You already know what life is like, so just let him figure it out. Some people just have to experience things on their own to really understand the guidance that, you know, your friends or loved ones are trying to give you.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're like, humans are preconditioned to think we know what's best for ourselves. So no matter how close a person is to you, or even how much you respect their opinions, if you think you know what's right for yourself, like you said, you just have to experience it. And then it's like a wake up call, you know, and then you kind of go back and you floods back to all the warning signs, and you're like, okay, but you know, we think we know what's best for ourselves until it happens.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, because there's no other way to say this other than the traumatic events of that night had to happen in order for Kunle to reconcile a few things within himself. And that is just, that's the nature of the film. I think there's no other way around it. And it's so interesting too, because I also think that Carlos, being their third roommate, also being, you know, a person of color, he still doesn't fully understand their experience as two Black men, but he understands a little bit of it. But he's still, even his experience is still different because he's still able to move through these police interactions differently than Kunle and Sean would have been. And the most interesting part of the film to me, actually, is a very small scene, but it's when Carlos sees his cousin and the girl that's with him is like, "You're Hispanic?" And I was like, "You need to leave her right now." Like the way she said it was like disgusted. Like, I would have never talked to you if I knew you were Hispanic. And it was just like, girl, what? So, and Carlos was like, "Yeah, he's Mexican." And she was like, "Oh," like, and I was like, "Oh, see, and this is the part of the film where we need to go." Like,
but
no.
notice they had Carlos sitting on the side. Like when the police is getting their statement, it's only his cousin and the friend. But the only thing that didn't sit right with me for it to really have that impact at the end is Kunle still had a white girlfriend.
Yep.
And that was a little off to me because when you go through something like that, like, you know, you kind of go through, I'm just on a timeout from everybody because I don't know who I can trust or what's going to happen. That was the only thing that I found a little bit out of character for you to go through something that traumatic and kind of how he felt towards everyone else. I thought it was weird for him to still be with the young woman at the end of the movie. I felt like that just didn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree because that was a red flag for me at the end. I was like, what? But also, I also kind of was like, I don't see Kunle being with anybody because he's still traumatized and he hasn't dealt with this trauma, like, period. But also don't see him being, you know, with this young Caucasian as well. Right. So it was twofold. I was like, I don't see this in any capacity. And I definitely don't see it in this one either that you're putting out here. So yeah, I 100% agree that ending was kind of like, okay. But especially when, you know, he has that interaction with Emma and them, because of that interaction right before, it didn't make sense to me as well. So I'm glad you brought that up because that's very true. All right, Sharronda. So how are you rating it? What are your last thoughts, you know, on Emergency?
I'm going back and forth on this, y'all. I don't know if I should give it. It's either a 3.5 or a 4 out of 5. I'm gonna give this a 4 out of 5 because I enjoyed it. It does get a little slow towards the middle, because you're kind of trying to figure out where things are going. But I think that, you know, it's so flawless, like not completely flawless, but it's flawless in the fact that you go in thinking that you're on this crazy comedy and then you really get hit with real life and what that could be like for people of color in this country. And so I really enjoyed it. It was one of the films that really surprised me. And I can't wait to see how people are going to react to this when it actually comes out. I think it's coming out on with Amazon Studios on Prime Video. So yeah. So I would say 3.5 out of 3.5. No, I lied. I'm gonna say a 4 because I like that it tricked me. I know that was so terrible, y'all, but just know I like the movie. That's all that matters.
Okay, I'm like, what's the truth? 3.5 or 4? What are we saying?
4. What is it?
Okay, well, Anthony, I'm gonna give you the floor next.
I'm gonna go 4 out of 5 stars on this one. I really loved the coming of age story of Kunle. I love the coming of age story of their friendship. Love the wave of emotions. Anytime a movie could just hit you in the heart and have you laughing, and sometimes do that in one scene and into the very next scene, just the wave of emotions was really a good time, but it definitely has a strong message to it. So I would definitely recommend catching this one once it's released.
All right, y'all giving it with the 4 out of 5s. Okay. So for me, you know, listen, I think that this film should be watched. I think it's really good. I will say, I agree that the middle is a bit slow. 90% of the middle was me saying, y'all leave her. That was 90% of the middle for me. I'm sorry. That was truly how I felt in the middle of this film. I'm going to give it a 3.5, mostly because that middle for me truly, it drug on a little bit. Like, I definitely felt like the film could have been 15 to 20 minutes shorter because we didn't need kind of all of the fluff in the middle. There are some good comedic moments in the middle, like when that woman sees him walking down the street, like, y'all in the right neighborhood? Y'all okay? So there are some highlights and comedic moments, but I think that more than it being a coming of age story for Kunle, I think it's a coming of age story for Sean as well. I think that they both really come into who they are, who they're meant to be through this journey. I really, really hate that it has to be through the lens of trauma, but I understand why. Kind of oftentimes, we're like, as Black people, we want to see some happy films. It doesn't have to always be rooted in trauma. But I do understand with this particular film why the writer and director, made the choices that they did. Because I do think in order for Kunle to become the person that he needs to be as he continues to move through this world, I think that this event was the catalyst for that, really, for him. And so I enjoyed the coming of the age aspect. And you know what? I'm also going to shout out Carlos's story too, because they needed a neutral third party like Carlos in a lot of ways. Like, Carlos needed to balance them out, because the energy between Sean and Kunle at times, I was like, yeah, Carlos definitely needs to be here. He definitely needs to be their third to kind of balance their energy a bit more, for sure. But, it's so interesting because the film stylistically happens like 90% in the dark. And it's so interesting to me because I feel like that's a metaphor for Kunle's journey. Like, once the sun goes down, just kind of darkness takes over in his life and he's trying to make the right decision. But there's so many different things. And you even see how like the light that he has at the start of the film kind of wanes due to the events of this. And so I think it's really, really good. And I do think people should check it out when it comes out on Amazon Prime. So I'm going to give it, I'm going to give it a 3.5. Guys, we are almost at the end of our Sundance 2022 journey. So the last thing we're going to do, I'm going to give you guys each the floor, and I want you to just recommend 3 films, only 3, based on your Sundance experience that you feel like people must see. And I say you feel like they should see. It doesn't necessarily have to be your top 3 films. You really actually don't even have to like them, because sometimes there are some really intriguing films that you don't really gel with, honestly, but you feel like people should see. Like, you're like, actually, like, this really not my jam, but it was so wild, I feel like you should see it. Like, I feel like other people need to watch this so I can talk to them about it. Like, sometimes you feel that way. So I want y'all, to give me 3 films that really kind of ignited thought in you. They were moving or they were really creative. What would be those 3 films? And then give me 1 key word to describe each film, because we're trying to keep it short. So, if you say Nanny because it was heartbreaking, I'm not going to judge you, so I'm going to let you kick this off for us, Anthony.
All right, so I'm going to pick Cha Cha Real Smooth. It's just authentic. I'm going to go with Fresh because it's just delightfully sadistic. And I'm going to give some docs some love. I'm going to go with Lucy and Desi because it's just so heartfelt.
Okay. Lucy and Desi still on my list. Also, that the publicists have to already know I'm just going to ask for it. It's on my list and I want to see it because I truly need to see this movie. I'm excited about it. Sharronda, are you ready? You ready for your 3? What we going to recommend to the people that they absolutely have to see?
Okay, well, I got to be rebel. So I'm going to give 4, not 3. Okay, first one, 892. Like we said, it's based on a true story. Everybody should know this story. It's going to make you really think about the world that we live in. And the one word to describe it, intense. Second, Navalny. It was a doc. It was one of the audience winners. It was one of the awards winners, the audience award. WTF is all I can say. Your jaw on the ground. Literally, like, if you take the most out of this world, doesn't make sense, like, plot of a movie, it will be this doc, but it's a true story. 3, Aftershock. Heartbreaking is the word that I have. It is a must-see documentary about the maternal mortality rate for women of color when giving birth. And it's something that we've been discussing a lot in the world, and it's something that this actually shows real stories of why there are people speaking up for everyone. Also, too, 4th one, I'm sorry, I had to add a 4th one, Descendant. It's a really great documentary. It's just very informative, I would say, and it's going to be on Netflix. I think it was purchased by Netflix. It's so good. And yes, I'm done. I'm sorry.
Now, Sharronda, being a rebel can't follow instructions. No, I'm just messing with you. I'm just messing with you. Yes, Descendant is going to be out on Netflix. So, I'm already looking forward to the plug giving me that one. So I'm like, y'all, I promise y'all, I tried with the documentaries, but it didn't work out. I only watched, features, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry. All right. So let me give y'all my 3. I'm going to start with, we need to talk about Cosby because it is wildly introspective. I believe survivors. That's all I'm going to say about that one. Next, I'm going to say, Am I Okay? And mostly because this film surprised me. And the one word I would like to say to describe it is risk. It's all about risk, taking risk in life. And I love that. And then the last film that I'm going to say people need to see is Resurrection. And honestly and truly, it's because it's so wild. I absolutely actually need to see it again because it was just so out of control. But Rebecca was serving acting. I mean, like, truly, Rebecca Hall was giving in this film, acting her behind off. And I am truly still confused, but that's okay because she was acting. So I have questions, but she was really acting. So, that's going to be my 3. Resurrection is wild, and I can't wait, honestly, to have a deep dive about that one with someone. I might need to do an extra bonus show to deep dive into Resurrection because, boy, I have some theories.
I just like the don't know what's happening, but acting. Okay, that's
like at times you were truly like, what is going on? But Rebecca is acting down. That's what you were just like, truly. Am I wrong, Anthony? Am I wrong? Oh, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, she was great. I mean, I liked Roth too. I liked them together. But the movie itself, I need to watch that one again to see if I can fully wrap my head around what I actually watched.
See, I'm not alone. You are like, wait, what? But also
the credits start rolling, and it's like, okay, that was something.
Yes, truly. Well, thank you both so much for joining this show. I had a blast talking to you all about all of these dynamic films. I had a blast at Sundance. Listen, before we sign off, I need you guys to plug your personal info, not your social or anything like that, but your personal social media info. Just give us the highlights and tell us where people can find your Sundance 2022 coverage. So I'll start with you, Sharronda.
It took everything in me not to sing where you said you could find me. It took me everything not to sing a Nelly song just now. You can find me on social at Pairweight, especially on YouTube, where I will actually be releasing all of my Sundance reviews. And I also have a cocktail show where we break down TV shows and films after everyone's watched it, called Cocktails with Sharronda. So yeah, just hit me up on social, especially on the YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe there. And KB, thank you for having me.
Yes, I actually was dancing when you said cocktails, but then I realized no one could see me. So there we go.
And I'm on a diet, so I can't really have cocktails. So I don't know how I'm going to do this show.
Mocktails. Okay, Anthony, you're up.
Thank you for having me also. This was a great time talking about movies. You can find me at Your Cinema Guy on Twitter. All my Sundance coverage is going to be on silverscreenanalysis.com. Some of it will probably be on the YouTube channel as well. Silver Screen Analysis is pretty much where you can find me rambling about movies all the time.
Well, listen, can't wait to watch. And so I am your host, KB. You can find me at the Lady KB, TheLadyKayb on Instagram and Twitter only. You can find my Sundance content at Through the Lens of Lady KB. But first, you can find my interview with W. Kamau Bell on complex.com, and we chatted about We Need to Talk About Cosby. So that is actually out right now on complex.com. So check that out. And then, I'm going to plug it because Sharronda and I had the opportunity to talk to Sterling K. Brown and Regina Hall and Honk for Jesus Save Your Soul. So you can check our respective YouTube channels out for that as well. And of course, you are currently watching the Hollywood Critics Association official YouTube channel. So don't forget to subscribe to HCA right now so you don't miss an episode of any of the shows, but especially the Festival Circuit show. We will be back for South by Southwest. So check that out. And please check out our coverage, our previous coverage of Sundance 2022, and follow HCA on all social media platforms. Thanks so much for watching and have a great day.